in this video, because the first thing she said argue. She didn't say discussion or had a conversation. She said argue. Then she tried to correct herself and say conversation. No, you meant what you said the first time. You like to argue, and that's okay for somebody else, not for Hink. So we're not going to argue and do all of this bullshit. And you're going to sit there and talk about, I'm going to use emotion and I'm going to shut down because I'm going to contain myself. Because I'm not going to get to the point where we're Sweetie's talking about and hit nobody in the goddamn mouth, right? Because I got too much to lose. And Heifer, you're not worth that, right? So I'm not going to do that. So I'm going to take the higher approach. So yeah, I don't think there's nothing wrong with shutting down if that's your way of getting yourself together, getting yourself in the right place, getting yourself at peace. You know, as a father, I never thought to whoop my son when I'm irate or pissed off at that moment because it's not going to be good for his light-skinned behind. So I had to make sure I need to calm down, reassess, evaluate what happened, have a conversation with him on why I am spanking him or why I'm disciplining him, and then proceed to do such. But you know, I don't have no problem with somebody. They say, "Hey, man, hey, give me a moment. We'll talk about this later." It's just not the right time right now. And ladies, I know a lot of you ladies want to get it off, get it out, get it done. Sometimes you got to give a man a moment because if not, you keep pressing him, you keep pushing him, and when he raises up and lashes out and he turns to the Incredible Hulk on your ass, you're going to feel like you're going to be intimidated, scared, feel like, oh, you know, I thought you was going to. No, that's not the case. But I'm letting you know right offhand. Give me a moment. We can talk. We're going to have the conversation. Please lead it. We're going to address this. It's just not the moment right now. So I don't have no problem with a man sitting there telling shutting down, say, hey, I need some time. Or a woman even doing the same thing. I need some time. Yep. And the person, whoever he's having a conversation, needs to respect that and not try to keep at being antagonistic, poking the bear, you know, saying, no, we're going to have him now. To the point where now she's ready to lay hands on you because you're not talking. Now, I'm saying this because I experienced this type of shit. And this is the type of chick that had to leave at a goddamn restaurant because that's how she likes to handle shit. She wants to get volatile. I'm not with that. That shit don't turn me on. Because I know I don't want to end up like Jonathan Majors. The man tried to get away from this woman. She kept trying to press him to have a conversation to the point she's running 3 or 4 blocks in order to have a conversation instead of letting the cooler heads prevail and maybe come back later, even if it takes the next day to talk about it, work through these situations, and then come to some type of resolution and resolve from there, and we can mess around and make love. You know what I'm saying? It'll be all good. Don't do it like don't press the issue like that. Go ahead, bro.
I just wanted to add to his question. He said, "Do people who shut down lack emotional intelligence?" I said, just because you does not mean that you are emotionally illiterate. Sometimes, um, emotional phase where like, you can't, or maybe something's going on in your head, and we can't read minds. Sometimes you gotta let a person blow some steam. Maybe we need to regroup back later. Maybe we need to stop this right here. But at some point, we're gonna have to come back and regroup. And if, like Lapeef said, once we regroup, like if it's a repeated thing where like you just keep shutting down and we just can't get it through, at that point, it then comes a lack of I say self emotional intelligence. It really becomes a thing of yourself at that point. You know, we can't save everyone, and that's the reality. We can't get through to everyone, and the ones that we can't get through, the ones can't sit down and have a mature conversation about and problem solving. That's an internal issue that they need to figure out where is that. They need to trace back where it's come, and they need to take whatever necessary to get that help and improve. can adapt to people because the problems is never going to end. Improving yourself is to that table that you're not going to have a choice to come back to later when another problem arises because you're going to have to at some point be able to problem solve with people, whether it's a coworker, whether it's your family, whether it's your friends, whether it's your partner. If not, like I said, you got to go back to yourself and figure out what's going on internally.
But geez, what if they, that's their way of handling things, but they have, like you said, we're able to handle it later, to have the conversation later. You don't necessarily have to have the conversation right there on the spot all the time, every time, right? Maybe
Right.
that's their way. You just got to know your person. You just got to know who you're dealing with, know the person you have a relationship with, and how they communicate, how they handle arguments, how they handle frustration, how they handle disappointment. These things you need to learn. And if you don't
Right.
learn it, then you're gonna find out the hard way.
Right. Honda builds millions of Honda Accords, but not every 2,000 Accord is built the same. It just depends on that individual.
Yeah.
I
So
like
I
to
say this, Hank, you made an excellent point with that joint. As far as like punching a person in the mouth doesn't translate well to with women, right? So that's really not an option because your life is ruined at that point. You already know what it is. You get a record now. You can't. There's certain HOAs don't want to let you in. You can't get a lot of jobs. There's certain things you just can't do anymore. You can't move the way that you would move like a grown ass man because you got that in the way, right? So I understand that point. How I definitely feel like that being your default is a problem unless you are dealing with someone who really does lack emotional intelligence themselves, right? Because you might just be doing it to avoid a situation escalating because you know where this is going. You know that once this person has reached this particular level, that there is no longer reasoning left. If reasoning's off the table, what are you doing? How do you feel like you can still communicate effectively if reasoning and rationale is off the table? There are some people who are trapped in relationships like that, whether because they are married, living girlfriend, they got children that they don't want to be apart from for the rest of their lives, and they're dealing with situations and they're like, oh man, she's not trying to hear it. Because there are some females, and I used to deal with some of them females back in the day. I grew up in Brick City. And that rah-rah, shaking their fingers in your face and all that, yo, I know how they are. None of those relationships would really last long. And once they started to exhibit that type of behavior, I would drop them for sure. However, I know what it's like. And I know some people who constantly still deal with that, right? So it comes a point where you're like, all right, this I have to shut down because I can no longer effectively communicate with this particular individual. And there's nothing you can do to talk to them. There's nothing you can do to reason with them. If communication is not unilateral, right? So if they are not offering you reasoning, then you cannot reason with an unreasonable person. They're unreasonable. So you have to take that into consideration. And once you see how that thing starts to escalate, you're like, do I really want to go there? Because now you learn really quickly what's next. All right. Are they going to become violent? Because, a lot of times women get away with violence, right? Are they going to throw something, punch me in the face, scratch me? How many cats you see coming through with a whole bunch of scratches on their face and their neck? And they know they can't do nothing. They know they could fling her across the room real quick, but the consequences for men are far greater, right? So it becomes very complicated when that person that you're trying to effectively communicate is your significant other that you're kind of binded to, right? For whatever reason that may be. And the best thing to do, the best choice, if you were ever faced with that situation, I would advise you to create an exit strategy at least. But if you can't leave immediately, but some people feel like they can't. And that's why they would just shut down. And there's different ways of shutting down. Your shutting down might be just not to talk at all. Your shutting down might be to become passive and start to patronize the person. So there's different ways of shutting down where you can no longer effectively communicate. That's what it all boils down to. So maybe that's your emotional intelligence, just understanding, damn, this is a bad situation no matter what. But it could be worse. Do I want to deal with the absolute worst, or do I just want to make it out of here today, just forget about it, and make it to the next day? Some of these cats be in relationships really doing a bit.